The Huawei ban is a really complicated topic that has a lot of policy and complex issues to it. But it does impact people here in the United States, and I wanted to put together a video that puts everything into one place and give you everything you need to know about the Huawei ban. Recently, Huawei was put on, in essence, a blacklist here in the United States, preventing any United States-based companies from providing technology to Huawei and preventing us from using any Huawei componentry or technology. This was really driven because of the telecommunications problems that we've been having with them. For many, many years, it's been rumored and felt as though because Huawei is a company based in China and has heavy ties to the Chinese government, that there could be espionage or other kinds of tampering with their devices that would, in essence, put our infrastructure at risk for people listening in or being able to pull data. Other countries in Europe also have the same concern. So it's not something that's solely driven by our policies or president, but it's something that's been there for a while. Not too long ago, the same thing happened with a company called ZTE, where they were put on a blacklist. And again, there was reasons behind that, and things came out from it, and they never really truly recovered. So the question is, how is this going to impact Huawei permanently, and how might that affect the United States? Huawei produces a lot more than telecommunications products, so this has a lot more of an impact on them than just 5G, which is where our concerns are. And then obviously we have a kind of trade issue with China that we're currently working through right now, and that is going to impact this, and I think that is ultimately going to get resolved, and Huawei will continue to do business as it did. The problem is this current ban, depending on how that gets worked out going forward, could impact their business pretty heavily, and they may not want to move forward as they have. So with that, what does it mean when we ban or blacklist, quote unquote, Huawei? What that really means is that companies like Google, Microsoft, Qualcomm, Intel, and a slew of others that are based here in America cannot provide technology to them. So Huawei, in addition to making telecommunications products, also makes things like laptops, smartphones, tablets, other cellular type devices, and they make use of those American companies' technology. So Android in particularly impacts them heavily, both in the tablet and smartphone space. Windows impacts them heavily in their laptop space. Intel and Qualcomm impact them on both sides. They use processors made by ARM, Intel. They use radios made by Qualcomm, processors made by Qualcomm. So being that they can no longer do business with us, what does that mean for ongoing products? It means that they can't develop them as they have. So they can't use those processors, they can't use the hardware, they can't use the software. So what do they use? This also impacts their current product base. So if they're currently using Android, they cannot upgrade to the newest version of Android. And there's things that came out as early as today kind of outlining what would happen, and that they'll continue to have access to Google core services like YouTube and Gmail and the Play Store. But on future products, they can't. And on future major upgrades, they will not be able to. So this obviously impacts their smartphone business heavily, and Huawei's smartphone business is actually second in the world. So they are technically larger than Apple, and they are only second to Samsung in the smartphone space globally. So this obviously impacts a really, really large portion of the Android ecosystem. And Huawei, in their defense, has put a lot of effort into developing and furthering the Android ecosystem, quality-built products, even laptops and things that have pushed other manufacturers to do the same. And now they're not going to have access to all of this technology, and it could greatly impact how they move forward. If they don't have access to Android and Windows, they have now officially said that they had kind of foreseen things like this coming, and they knew that they didn't want to be solely reliant on another company that isn't under their umbrella. So they had been working on their own operating system, which is obviously Android-based. Android, at its core, is open sourced. It strays pretty far from where Google is with Android. But if you wanted to grab the open source version of Android and make your own operating system, you can, and there's nothing preventing you from doing that. The issue is you're not going to have access to Google services. So YouTube, Gmail, Play Store are all things that could be potentially sideloaded, but they're not going to be developed for, they're not going to be updated automatically. So this greatly impacts whatever OS they might have developed. It also can't be Microsoft based because Windows is not open sourced fully, and they would have to use some form of Linux or something on their laptops. So again, the operating system issue is something that they're going to have to solve for, and then an ecosystem of sustainable apps for those operating systems is yet another issue. So for them to come up with an operating system, maybe not so hard, and they may even have something. The issue is going to be then people like Hulu and Netflix and YouTube, how do they develop for those operating systems? Would they want to? Could they? And then how do they keep that updated and continue to run? It's just yet another platform that people don't want to have to write for. So potentially this is a very uphill battle for Huawei, and it could impact them pretty heavily. The other thing that I think it kind of impacts is the focus on where we're going with 5G. So 5G is really important globally. It's very important for the United States with infrastructure. It's going to push a lot of people that don't have access to broadband to something that they can now have broadband with. It has a lot of different things that impact a lot of different people. And if we can't use Huawei technology here in the States, or we can't have them involved in that conversation, it's really going to prevent us from moving forward. And it's going to impact everyone globally, whether we like it or not. So again, working through trade issues and understanding security concerns is important, because if they're not involved, it's like taking a major player out for us, and it could prevent us from moving forward quickly, or it could prevent us from moving forward in things that they may have solved, and now we have to create other things to kind of catch up. The other story that follows this is China's retaliation and what the US has done to Huawei. Huawei is a very large company in China. The trade negotiations and the policies that we're now enforcing on their companies could potentially come back to our companies. So if China decides that they no longer want to make Apple products in their country, or tariff that and make products significantly more expensive to build there, or just import and have their countries actually be using them at a consumer level, is something that has been floated. I think that if you look at economic studies that have been published in the past, this has been something that has existed for a long time now. You look at Shenzhen, you look at Guangdong, these areas of China are significantly impacted by Apple, and they have significant double-digit GDP margins that are in there based off Apple commerce, and both building their products and then using their products in the local communities. So it's unlikely that China would enforce that, because it would really severely impact these areas. It would force their country to then have to backfill that business, which they don't currently have. And it's something that's a little less likely. We would obviously have to monitor that and see, and ultimately what I think would happen is Apple would take the hit to their margin. As odd as it sounds, Apple could actually take the hit of losing that business and having to build their products elsewhere, whereas I don't think China would actually be able to sustain that kind of loss in their commerce. But you know, it remains to be seen, and this is something that has been floated, and that there could be a retaliation to us. I think that it's unlikely that that would happen, and I think that this Huawei thing has more to do with telecommunications, infrastructure, security, their cooperation with their government, and some of the policies here and abroad. It doesn't necessarily have to do with their smartphone business and their laptop business and software and Google, and that's what's making news today. But ultimately, this is because of a trade negotiation that's going on, and concerns over security, specifically with telecommunications and the backbone of where we're going with 5G. Again, this is something that very closely mirrors something that happened with ZTE, which is another company that had a similar issue. This could impact Huawei greatly. It could delay things here in the United States, seeing something like a Mate X phone that folds open and competes with the Samsung product. It could impact global smartphone sales and ecosystems like the Google Play Store and Android, and how that stuff gets deployed with their products. Again, it's kind of unlikely, and it's kind of a jump to assume that Huawei has something that's so great that it would then start to displace what Google and Apple and Microsoft have built. It's more likely that they're going to have to work around this to stay in business and stay competitive. But it could impact their telecommunications piece of their business, and rightfully so, then impact the rest of their business. More to come on this topic. Interesting that politics and the presidency is impacting the technology world. This could be really good for folks. This could be something that we're going to have to monitor, but please stay tuned. I hope this video helped you understand what's going on with Huawei and how this could potentially impact other businesses. Thanks for watching.